Let's talk about how you might get started on the maze project. You'll notice that first off I have my project set to, well, wherever it is, to the maze spring scene. But if you want, you can just copy this Maya file over to a new fresh project setting. And again, as mentioned, these are all put with origins at places where you can very easily move them around. Now this is a bake-based workflow that I want to talk about first, and another part of this might be deciding how you might make this your own. So you might even duplicate these and add them to a new object layer called My Maze. So that this way you can modify this and you don't have to worry about damaging the originals. I'm going to start with just some of the basic wall panels. In fact, this one right here. And another thing in this file is my examples of high poly models. But just to show you how easy these are, I'll now duplicate all of these, add them to a new layer, and call it high poly. My high poly. Just typical non-destructive workflow. And these are the ones that I might start making more interesting. So you might want to concept this out. You might want to look at other people's work and concepts to get an idea of things. So, again, this Tiago Klafke guy is a good example. You can see perhaps how he makes little panels and stuff. You can go to conceptart.org and also to CG textures. Not necessarily for grabbing textures yet, but just looking at metal objects and seeing how they differentiate. You might want to do a different theme than the ones I've put out there. You might want something that's more of an actual building style, or wrought iron. Again, somebody did flowers last quarter, and that was pretty cool. So have fun with it. Try and make it your own, and try and have a cohesive theme. So let's look at metal. So there's some cool ideas for metal. There's little beams like this that come off, and then they have stuff like that. So to make high poly versions of this, all you have to do is start adding extrusions and stuff. Shift right click to get a multi-cut tool. G to do it again. And this one I'll just put like right there. And I'm sort of just creating a little lip here where I want it to come out and over. But I'm mostly being pretty abstract right now. I'm going to bevel and just change the amount of it to 0.05. Again, I recommend setting hotkeys for this stuff. I like using the multi-cut tool a lot. So I just inserted an edge loop, snapped it to here so it's right on top of itself. And next week in class, by the way, or on Thursday in class, we're going to have some speed modeling stuff, because I do think we need more of that. And I want to make sure you guys start getting comfy with the idea of being really, really fast at modeling. Oh yeah. What do I want to do? Let's step back a little bit. If you're doing it right, modeling should start being something that's very, very fun. And you just do it at night, before you go to bed, to relax, to blow off some steam. Change my mind about this edge loop. Control delete will delete an edge loop and its components. As soon as possible, just try and get very, very fast at modeling. So there I got some faces for my overhang. I don't want to do this. I'm also going to select these. Small amounts of extrusion. And then these, because they're going to be like a lip overhang. Check it in object mode. It's looking pretty good. I like this. One of these was the thing I was looking at. This was the panel. So now I'm going to add some bolts maybe to go along here. Pull that down a little bit further. So again, I'm starting to get something of an interesting detail pretty easily. I'm going to assign a blend so I can see the reflectivity a little better on it. And keep on adding more model detail. You should set yourself, especially over the break when you have time. Try and set yourself modeling challenges where you try to get as much done as possible in a very short amount of time.
Are you going to start doing those in your classes?
Yes, we're going to do one next week even. Is that good or bad?
That's a good idea because you may already know this, but Matt does it
And the ZBrush one?
his high-res
Yeah.
classes, just so people get just get the interface of the ZBrush down.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be good just to get
Same thing with Maya.
yeah, just to not even so much for the interface, just to get proper or workflow, just to get a feel for how it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't learn modeling by reading books. You learn it by modeling. Same thing for drawing. It's kind of the fun of 3D is that, and most artistic disciplines, is that it does get to be a muscle memory based thing rather than I don't know, going into nursing where you have to actually memorize stuff.
It's way more fun.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it with
Mm-hmm. So I created this little nut. Just a tiny little detail. It'll look fun when it's baked out. So there's my nut, right? I'm going to duplicate it the smart way, which is I'm going to move it over here and say edit, duplicate special. It's going to be an instance. And I'm going to translate it about 0.2. Let's try that. Oh, wrong axis. Looks like it's the 0.2. There we go. And I'll undo it one last time. Now I'm going to up the number of copies to about 10. Sure, let's try that. Never mind. 10 copies, 0.2 on the z-axis. Hey, look at that.
It's so fucking oh my god. Her shoulder is the report. I mean, tell Adam we're up. Tell him
So that's just a little bit of trace detail. That'll be fun when we bake it out. You can find other things like welds, seams, fasteners. Now I'm going to do one thing to my low poly version. Oops. So this is important. The one thing I would do as a separation of objects on your low poly versions is I have found, and I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure this is the direction I'm heading. I think that if it's a different material property of massive amounts, it's better to have it be a separate object. And what I mean by that is if it's a light source, separate that out as like a plane, and you can set that as a light source in Unity, and actually do your light baking in Unity now. Or if it's, say, a transparent window, like initially when I modeled these, I was figuring these would be like transparent windows. So for the transparency, I might cut this out and have it be a separate plane, actually. And that way I can have that be a separate material on it. There's fancy ways to do it all through one material, but I don't want to go into that. And I don't think we have time in class to learn nodes in Unity, let alone the theory of nodes at all. So maybe I'll do like some floor lights down here on this. And I'm going to start with my my low poly one. I will select this face, right click, no wait, shift right click, duplicate face. I'll hide that. And really quick, I'm going to make this a light idea. So let's just have fun with it. I'm going to purposefully make it a little off-center. Extrude. extrude. And extrude. And I'm not going to go all the way down with this, just a little bit. So this is my new low poly version of this floor panel before I connect it up with this other one. And again, we want this to be low poly, so I might do things like go to verts, use vert snap, clean these all up. Might use isolate select on it. And that way I don't have to mess with other objects. And you will have to re-unwrap this if you're doing this. But again, I gave you as much of these assets to start with as possible. And if you don't want to do something this fancy, you can always just actually, now that I think about it, maybe I'll do this a simpler way. I still have that other one hidden, so I'm actually just going to delete these faces. And now this can just be an object that sits on top of that plane. So show last hidden will bring that back up. So yeah, so now I can just have this be an object that sits on top of this and I don't have to mess with extra geometry. But I will, on this, select this one face, make it a separate object by going to polygon, mesh, separate. No, let's extract. And I'll join these two together. So now I have two separate objects. One is my low poly wall, quote unquote, and the other is a separate object specifically to be a light source so that I can assign a material to it. Again, these are very, very low poly. And that's sort of the one place that we'll need it. I'll probably end up adding some light sources up here too. So, the next thing I'm going to do is select all these, duplicate these faces. Just double check they're there. Separate. Again. And move this one to the high poly layer. There's low poly. Now on these high poly layers, I'm oftentimes not caring about where my objects are. It's fine if these are lots of little piecemeal objects, such as these, because eventually I can combine them all, and if I mash them all together at the end, the bake doesn't really care. So, high poly, you can get away with this sort of thing. Let's see, let's look for some more cool ideas. A lot of stuff like this, like welding seams, might be really good for texturing later. But for now, we don't need to worry. We can do something like this, just simple extrusions. Actually, let's do something that's a little less auto. So something like that, where I'm setting these all at about the 70% mark. So that'll be a little less uniform. Offset to around point. Yeah. Nah. How about there? And you know, it's very simple to just start getting lots of trace details that are going to bake out. This is not a long modeling job, is it? But when I bake it out, it's going to give me a lot of details that, were I to try to paint them in Photoshop, they would take forever. And, you know, ZBrush is really good for a lot of things, but a lot of times it's kind of overkill when it's modeling tasks that could otherwise be successfully handled in, you know, 10, 15 seconds, right? What do you think? High poly enough? A little big, cool. Alright, let's call that one good. I might move to this one next. These three, because they have, oh no, I'm going to do something up here. So now I'm going to go work on the roof, because with the roof and the wall and one floor, we can actually start getting these into Unity and at least have an iterative version of our level where at least one of these is all set, even if it's just one straight hallway from the start to the end. So first off, on this one, I'm starting on the low poly one because, again, I think I'm going to have a problem where I want more polygons. So I'm going to duplicate this face. Shrink it down. Yeah, let's start by having some sort of cool detail here. Right from there. Delete these. So now I have an interesting shape for a window of opportunity. And if I grab all these in face mod, again, I hate that it goes to the modeling toolkit stuff all the time. I'll extrude this out. Extrude it with an offset of 0.05. Now the thing that I'm trying to do is I want to have a light source that's going to be really cool when it bakes out by having this plane be our sort of starting point as our light emitter, and then have like rows of bars going here, and that'll create a cool cast where the light's coming out of it. So I think what I need to do is first off delete these backface polygons, because there's going to be the whole plane against it, right? Now these faces I can extract, and they are now a separate object from this. And if I now display my last hidden, display show last hidden, that polygon comes back. You can sort of get an understanding of how this sits on top of that, right? But this plane is very slightly in front of it, so it'll work as a light source. I'm going to duplicate these faces. And I hope that you're doing something like modeling along, or trying to just start on modeling your own if you're going to do the mechanical one. I'm going to select these faces that I just made. Extrude edge, just pull it out on the z-axis. So this is the starting point for my bars. And I'm using their default normals to start off pretty correctly. I'm going to delete some of the stuff that I know is just going to be expensive later, because again, this is a place where I'm actually spending some polygon budget. Control delete deletes both an edge loop and its components. Display, show, last hidden. Let's start them over here. I actually use the same duplicate special that we had. And voila! So I'm just eyeballing it. Now I can delete these leftover ones. Now on these, I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to add edge loops where I know I'm going to end up deleting these ugly faces. Oops. Did one thing wrong. Because I gotta do that weird delete thing. There's a couple ways I could solve this. I could go all the way back to before I had instanced it and instead say duplicate special, turn it to copy instead of instance. But the other thing I can do is just grab these three troublesome bars and say, I think it's modify, convert, instance to object. And so now it's not an instance anymore. It's a separate being of its own nature. So here's an interesting modeling conundrum. If I want this to not quite be touching this, how might I move it down while not having to mess with any of my insertions? These are perfectly aligned up here and perfectly aligned up there. I think what I'm going to do is combine these into one mesh to start with. I'm going to hit Insert, and I will change their origin to be on one of their vertices. Hit Insert to close that. Now on this, we can actually insert. Actually, hold on one sec. There might be an even easier way. I think I can just make this my live surface. And yeah, that worked. So by having that be the live surface and this be the origin is constantly going to try and stay on this mesh, and therefore I can move it a little bit. There we go. Lastly, and select all edges. And hi.
Good eye catching that, Oscar. The faculty, the teaching thing on that summer workshop thing.
Aha.
That was odd. You sent me a note, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm
Send an email during class.
Yeah, it's good. Sure as you care. Sorry for interrupting you guys. Yeah. I'm doing up a promo thing for it that we can send. I'll forward it to you. I'll do like a PDF, basically saying what the whole deal is and
Get a pretty picture in it.
something like that.
Sure.
I'm going to put it together right now. So I'll send it along to you. So you're welcome to, or if you want to modify it for your clientele, that's fine.
Yeah, I was going to email the Seabug people about it.
But at least this will have kind of all the contact information. It's almost impossible to actually find classes online and actually register for them, which makes it even more fun.
Oh boy.
But anyway, but I really want to do them, and I'm just doing something up right now. It's not that pretty, but it's more informational. But at least it has all the stuff on it. I'll shoot it along to you, and you can. You have a good network. You can shoot it out too.
Yeah.
I see your stuff on
I
Facebook.
don't know if this will count, but I do have a pretty alien.
Sure, send it along if you
something like
want.
that.
Even if you want to send like a screenshot of the whole, with the interface and everything.
Look at how beautiful he is.
It's pretty
But-
good.
It's
But if
I
you
never
want-
finished it.
But if you want to even send along something like that showing the user interface and stuff too, that's fair enough as well. Just to have it as kind of like here's a poster image of what we're talking about.
Okay,
Thanks.
cool. Phil Trumbo! Let's save our work. Always save your work. And again, this idea of separating out your meshes where they are specifically light sources or transparencies is kind of a new thing, and I'm going to have to experiment with this pipeline myself to see if it works. But Unity's baking abilities in 5.0, and that's where you should be working, have gotten really, really phenomenal. So I want to make sure we're trying those out.
The interface for it is really simplistic too, because they take like all the.
It's like all jammed into a super material.
Yeah, and then a lot of it's under the hood.
Yeah.
So, unless you really want to get super in depth, it's pretty easy to do about it.
Anyways, I don't know where my other one went, so I'm actually going to move this here. So these objects are what's this? I hate this about Maya. So this object I'll hide. I'll select all the. What the heck? Alright, I don't know why it's not letting me select that. Tech, roof. There we are. Modify. Edit. Delete all by type. History. I don't know why it won't let me select this object. Oh, it was the live object. That was what it was. That's why I couldn't select it. So now I'm combining these, and then I just want to make sure my light source faces are separated. Mesh, extract. Alright, looks correct. So with that, I can now clone these. Control D, and those are my new high poly ones. So again, you can see how I'm saving out polygon budget for a few select things. Number one is when I need it to be a separate object so that I can have it as a light source. And again, there's ways you could do it through texturing, but we're not going to go there. We're just going to do it the simple way, which is having a separate object. And the second way you can separate these out, or the reason you might spend geometry, is something like this side panel, which is something that is going to speak in profile. We're going to see that if you're walking down this hallway, you're going to see this computer rig jumping out a little bit. And so it might be worth a little modeling detail there. But you generally save that for, if it's a low poly project like this, you save that modeling detail for when it becomes something visible in profile. All right, let's look at what we got going on. And so now for this top ceiling, I might start adding some extraneous detail that's going to look cool when I bake it. I'm going to do a remove double. And maybe it's not your favorite thing, but I hope modeling is a little bit fun for you, because I really like doing it. I'm going to do something like this, because that way it's not totally... I want this to not be totally symmetrical. I want this to... It should have a reason why I'm using this big face to represent a lot of detail at once. So if I make it totally symmetrical down the middle, it kind of is a waste. So I'm going to do something like that. I think there's something I can do. I'll grab these squares. I'm going to bevel it. And then I can go into the bevel node. So who knows? Some wall paneling, right? And then continue this with the floor, but the main thing is I have like these separate objects for essentially my, what's it called? My light sources. So I'm going to start baking some of this stuff out. And I am going to borrow from my old file of the high poly text stuff. Just use this floor. You'll notice the floor was made using pretty much the same thing of just extrusions, separations, inserting edge loops in a way that becomes artistically appealing. I'll add that as to high poly. And I can actually I'm going to save all of these high poly models out as one and just bake them all at once. So if I go mesh, combine, and then I have to do one last step, which is trying to find any faces that don't have exactly 4 or 3 sides. I think the easiest way to do this is if I just select everything and say mesh quadrangulate, it'll force anything that's not a quad to be a quad. We can test this in X normals. So I'm going to grab this mesh, which is right here. It's all my high poly meshes stuck together, and export it. File, export selection. I'll just save it to my desktop with great naming conventions as one of these files that already exists, such as large.fbx. Because naming conventions are important. And now I'm just going to once again double check my UVs before I export these. You do need your UVs to be in some semblance of an idea. So some of the newer stuff that I made, they're going to have kind of bad UVs, and we might want to go and fix that. So here I've selected only these, and I moved their UVs off to the side, which is often a good idea to start off with. And I think these are what I need to work on there. I might want to just squish all these down to a single vertex in space and just procedurally model them by sticking them over something. If you wanted to be fancier and have them all have the same UVs, what you could do is go to your side view, and from the side view you could say create UVs based on camera. Then they would be based on the camera, and you could rotate them to fit or be exactly 45 degrees or whatever. But I don't really care about that. I'm actually quite content to have them smashed down and just procedurally moved around. But I do want them out of the way for now, just so they don't mess up the bake. Okay, so now I can export these as a low poly model. And because I modeled these to specifically have the same UVs every time, or have their UVs share a texture, I can combine them and export them as one mesh, just like I did with the high poly version. Or possibly just export the selection as one giant UV. Export selection. We'll say this is small. High poly mesh. I think these are even still correct. Again, I like considering this to be something closer to a recipe than a, I don't know. Basically, I like having as many textures baked as possible because then I can make a recipe using all of these combined somewhere. I will generate. Hmm. Let's put. I'm having some bake errors, and this is where you have to start learning about. Oh, that's why. I wasn't actually using those ones. So if you're having problems, consider doing things like checking it in the XNormal viewer. In my case, what the problem was is I thought I had it correct, but I was not actually looking at the files I had exported. Let's try that for now. And then, again, you'll get an error if there's problems, and it is, in fact, because there are faces that are wrong. Take a quick break, and then I'm going to pause recording.